Hello, and thank you for listening to Rangers to the Core. This podcast is brought to you by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Wilmington District Environmental Education Team. With this podcast, we strive to keep you informed, educated, and give you a behind-the-scenes look at everyday life as a park ranger. I'm your host, Dylan Brown, and it is time to get to the core of today's topic. Hello and welcome to Rangers to the Core. This is your November episode, and we are continuing with how we get things done, talking specifically today about volunteering. But as always, we got to start with our icebreaker. And our icebreaker for this month is, have you ever volunteered before, and why did you do it? So let's start with Carmen first.
Thanks, Dylan. Again, I'm Carmen from the Wilmington District Natural Resources Management section, and I've volunteered in various capacities and roles throughout my life. But my most recent volunteer experience, and this happened just the other week, is being a chaperone on a school field trip, so volunteering with the school system. And I like to chaperone for many reasons. First, I get to spend some extra time with my children, but also, I help being the chaperone make the field trip possible by supporting the teachers and the staff during the trip. And then from a work perspective, I like to chaperone on these field trips because I get the opportunity to see how other agencies and organizations present educational programs. And that's always fun for me to watch and see how they manage groups and present topics. So I have a lot of fun myself enjoying that aspect of it.
Awesome. What about David?
So, yes, I actually started with the Corps. So I'm David Schwartz at Falls Lake, and I actually started with the Corps in 2010 volunteering. Back in 2010, I was a junior or sophomore at Syracuse University, and I think I had to do a internship or some type of summer program with some credits to fulfill my college experience. And I'm trying to think how I heard of the Corps. Maybe I went on volunteer.gov or so. I found a Corps position, a volunteer position in Ohio. Just kind of helped out with the Rangers there, kind of like a project like I'm at right now, where we didn't manage the campgrounds, we didn't manage the day use areas. We pretty much just took care of the dam, just doing water safety programs and helping out, doing gate changes and just whatever had around the lake. So I needed to do it for internship and had no idea. It kind of changed my life and start my career with the Corps. And it's been a good experience. And if you ever want to get in with the federal government, and volunteering is a great way. And that's what the podcast is about today.
That's great, David. Thank you. What about Grace? Do you want to share with us any of your volunteer experience, Grace?
Sure. I have never actually volunteered with the Corps, but I have volunteered at local park when I was in college. I volunteered, actually followed some of the program. They weren't park rangers, but they were programmers. I followed them around and helped them with some programs, helped set up and tear down, just to gain some experience with planning programs and facilitating programs. And then I volunteered at Cuyahoga Valley National Park in Akron, Ohio, or Peninsula, Ohio, to gain more experience in trail maintenance. So I did some work with them on National Public Lands Day, and then also the other national day, I think it's called Make a Difference Day. It's in October. So I did a few trail maintenance days with them as well, just to kind of get some experience in that, and then also kind of get my foot in the door with becoming a seasonal park ranger there, which then I did the following year.
Thank you, Grace. That's awesome. What about John?
Hello, everyone. This is John Bamford, Park Ranger at Beaver Jordan Lake. Yes, I have volunteered. I think the first time I actually volunteered was like David, while I was in college. I had a class where a minimum number of volunteer hours needed to be met doing something in the local community. So I decided to volunteer with the food bank of Central and East North Carolina, and I really enjoyed that. So I've actually carried that through to, through more modern times. So they're now one of my favorite places to volunteer, and it's really convenient because they're like 3 minutes from where I live, the local food bank. So I also really enjoy volunteering through another local organization to Durham called Keep Durham Beautiful, where they will organize various park cleanups, street cleanups occasionally. They'll do tree plantings at local schools or replant street trees that have had to get taken down. So I just really enjoy volunteering. It helps me feel connected to the local community. And I always feel, that sense of satisfaction when after I volunteer, there obviously, times can be tough and there are various unmet needs out there. So, especially at the food bank, knowing that, the efforts will go to help somebody locally in need. So I really, really enjoy volunteering. I have a very small one at home. So my time that I can commit to volunteering has definitely gone down as of late. But hopefully when he gets older, we'll be able to potentially do something as a family together.
That's great, John. Thank you for sharing. That sounds very fulfilling. Let's go to Emily now.
I love this question because I just love volunteering myself, which all of us do. We just talked about all of it, but I am a certified Virginia Master Naturalist. So a part of that program is volunteering a certain number of hours every year, annually, in different capacities. We have some restrictions on what counts as volunteer hours versus not. I've volunteered a lot in my life in college, different clubs, all that kind of stuff. But this is kind of my most recent volunteer experience. So I actually volunteer consistently and regularly at a Virginia State Park, about 50 minutes from where I live, Stanton River State Park. And so I get to go over there and I mostly do trail stewardship work for them. I'll go help out with big event days if I'm available. Sometimes that's hard because, our summer schedules and all that fun stuff can be a little bit challenging to coordinate with other things going on. But I mostly do trail stewardship for them, but I also do interpretive programs for them. So what we do in our normal day-to-day jobs, I'll go do for them, which is actually really kind of fun and refreshing because they have different interp rangers and different things. So I actually get to bounce like a lot of cool ideas off of them and kind of, I don't like to say steal ideas because sharing is caring, but, we kind of work together. Like I'll share with them some of our materials and programs we actually have here at work, and they'll, do the same with me. And so it's a very reciprocal relationship in that regard. So it's a lot of fun being able to work with them, learn from them, as well as share from my experience, both with trail stewardship and with interpretive programming. So that's a lot of fun getting to help them out. But then I also I do a lot of birding. And so as a part of that, I also volunteer for Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources doing bird counts every quarter at some certain areas in the region so that we can, know more about our birds. So yeah, those are kind of my more recent volunteer stuff. And I love doing it because it's a lot of fun. I get to meet new people. I get to feel like I'm contributing to something larger than myself, so good times.
Absolutely. That's some pretty cool things to do there, Emily, as far as how it would translate to our actual jobs and stuff. That's pretty neat.
Sometimes it can feel like, oh, this is kind of worky, but it's okay. It works out, it's okay. It's good. It's fun.
It kind of takes the whole Rangers to the core thing to the extreme.
It does. But it's a good time, and I get to go and help out and not, be in a different environment. So
that's awesome. So my answer to the icebreaker as far as volunteering before, yes, I volunteered quite a bit. Guess it would start in the Boy Scouts, because in Boy Scouts for multiple ranks and things, you're required to volunteer a certain number of hours to achieve your rank. I think different merit badges require other volunteer hours. And then, of course, your Eagle Scout project. And if other people in your troop are doing Eagle Scout projects, you volunteer to assist with those projects and things. And my favorite one as a scout was probably scouting for food, where you go out one Saturday and spend all day handing out grocery bags, and then you go out the next Saturday and spend all day collecting all the grocery bags that the people hopefully fill up. And then we take them to the food pantry and help stock the food pantry, and that was always a good time. But my modern day volunteering looks a little different. The main volunteering thing I do is I'm a pro staff member with the Fallen Outdoors. So as a pro staffer, basically we volunteer to put on like hunting, fishing trips, outdoor trips. It could be outdoor concerts. It could be a car race. It could be some sort of sporting event, ball game, something like that. And we basically just take another vet with us that's a member of the organization, like as a participant. They kind of put in for it on Facebook, and we do little drawings and stuff to see who gets to attend. And so, yeah, then they get to come out and do those events, kind of have, a relaxing time with like-minded people, if you will. So it's all of our pro staff is veterans. So it's veterans, taking other veterans out, because, a lot of times other veterans don't think that someone who's not been there, done that, can sort of understand where they're coming from and what they're going through. And the whole purpose of the organization is to provide these events to counteract the veteran suicide rate, which is 22 veterans a day is the average rate. So this program goes to kind of fight against that with, kind of providing an outlet, giving them something to do. So yeah, I've had a really fulfilling time doing that. This is my first year doing it, and I see myself doing it for several years. And it's been fun. All right. So that is our icebreaker for our crew. Here a little later, we will actually have two other special guests on. It's the Hornick family. They're a couple who volunteers at Kerr Scott Lake and does all kinds of work for them. And so we'll hear an interview with them here in a little while that Grace is going to do, and she works down there at Kerr Scott Lake with them. So we're looking forward to that. So now I'm going to turn it over to Carmen, who's going to talk about the core of today's podcast.
Thanks, Dylan. In just a few minutes, we're excited to dive into the topic of volunteers. But first, I wanted to give a little overview of the volunteer program across the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So volunteers play an invaluable role in helping the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers meet our recreation and environmental stewardship goals. Across the Corps, on average, there are 35,000 volunteers annually that donate 1.5 million hours of their time, representing a labor value of $40 million. These volunteers may be part of a formal partnership or standalone individuals and groups. Sometimes they're individuals that are volunteering as part of a one-time event. Other times, as we'll discuss later, they're volunteers that are helping out on a more regular basis. In the Wilmington District last year, we had 1,600 volunteers donate 32,000 hours of their time, representing a labor value of more than $959,000. And overall, a volunteer's time, skills, and knowledge are priceless. We certainly couldn't get things done the way we want to without them. And we look forward to sharing the ins and outs of the volunteer program with you today. And hopefully, maybe you'll want to come volunteer with us.
Awesome. Thanks, Carmen. So today we're kind of going to use a little bit of different format, just sort of an open discussion about volunteering. So our first topic is going to be, what are the different types of volunteer opportunities? I know here at Philpott Lake, one of the unique ones we have that I don't remember having at Kerr Scott is we have a beach safety watch volunteer who sort of just watches over the swimming areas and reminds everyone, to stay safe, to stay within the boundaries sort of thing. It's definitely not an enforcement role at all, but they're kind of there as a visual aid for us, just to remind people that there's a safe way to go about things. And then I think as we're going to hear about later, we've recently changed our gatehouse, or our campground attendants, I should say. So whereas used to, it was usually two different contractors that ran the campgrounds. And typically they were a couple, but not always. Sometimes they were just more of a team. But anyways, so Team A would man the gatehouse for like 4 days, and then Team B would man the gatehouse for 4 days, and then it would just rotate a cycle like that. What we've changed to this year to save on cost and because we had a lot of interest in this role, specifically for volunteering, is using volunteer gate attendants. So we now have a paid contracted gate attendant that works Thursday through Sunday, which is our peak times. Volunteer gatehouse attendants, they man the gates from Monday through Wednesday right now in order to get their required volunteer hours to keep their site.
At JHK, we have some similar kind of opportunities. You know, there's a lot of different types of volunteer positions out there. And I like to say the sky's the limit, really. We have volunteers help us all the time in gatehouses, doing maintenance work. It could be everything from painting to repairing stuff to fixing things to staining decks to helping us with displays. You know, I mean, it could be anything, you know, and then we also have volunteers help us with our interpretive side of what we do here. We staff our education center in the summer with volunteers. We have, you know, so many different types, so much work to be done, you know, at all of our lake projects. And so anybody who's interested in volunteering that has a passion for something, whether it's talking to people, visitor assistants, or doing a program, or maybe you don't like talking to people and you love to paint instead, you know, or you like to hike trails or do anything really, work with shoreline customers, we will absolutely take the help, you know? So it's one of those things where the sky's the limit, I guess is how we see it. You know, the Rangers here at John H. Carr, we can't have enough volunteers in many ways. So yeah, I don't know how other people feel about that, but if anybody calls us about volunteering and you want to come volunteer with us, we're going to try our best to make it happen.
Yeah, we can definitely never have enough. I'll also add that across every lake, sometimes we have special events and things where we have volunteers that come out for like a one-time, it might be a shoreline cleanup, or it might be, say we're hosting a National Public Lands Day event. And in the past, I know Grace did this at Kerr Scott, where folks came in to help in the gardens and things. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and sometimes those do come as those standalone events too.
Yeah, Carmen, actually, to add to what I just did at Kerr Scott, I did a river cleanup down the Yadkin River, which is the river that leads into the lake. And I took on, at the beginning of the school semester, fall semester, I took on 4 students from Appalachian State University to mentor them in the program design class. So I signed them up as volunteers because they helped design an event for me, basically from scratch, and then call and get donations for things, different things like that, and then like equipment and supplies for our cleanup. And then they also recruited their own volunteers as well. So we actually had 11 people go down the river on canoes and big floating tubs. And we pulled out like over 40 tires and a bunch of different trash, a lot of big stuff. And that was we did that on October 29th. So that's one of the ways of one of those standalone events where, tying back to our partnership podcast, we have an MOU, or a Memorandum of Understanding, with Appalachian State University. So I did worked with them through that partnership to then get volunteers to help clean the lake or the river. So I do a lot of those standalone events where it's, you know, a Girl Scout or Boy Scout group needs to earn badges. So I'll create an event for them to come do a one-time thing where they do a service project, and then maybe I do a program with them too, like a tree ID program or something where they're earning some kind of badge for their program. And then we also get a few hours of volunteer service from them. And then they get in turn a like free night or 2 of camping. So we have all kinds of volunteer experiences and opportunities here at Kerr Scott as well.
Very cool. Does anybody have anything sort of unique that we may have missed that we haven't covered already?
Yeah, this is John here at Jordan Lake. Okay. So Emily talked a little bit about jobs or volunteer opportunities for people that maybe aren't the most outgoing. And so I think we have a good one to offer here at Jordan Lake that is monitoring our bald eagle population. So that involves standing typically deep in the woods for at least an hour and enjoying nature and monitoring bald eagle activities from a distance that is not likely to disturb them. So, it's a lot of times it's very good exercise too, because you are hiking into a location that may not be close to a road or another trail. So we have 25 bald eagle nests here at Jordan Lake. For the most part, we have pretty good coverage. And by coverage, I mean twice a month monitoring for what we ask for is an hour for each monitoring session. So, and those sessions would last from, we'll say early to mid-January, all the way through fledging, which is when the eagles, the baby eagle or eagles leave the nest, which is typically in our area around the end of May, possibly into early June. So, but that's not to say, we have pretty good coverage as far as volunteers go, but, situations change, people move on for various reasons. So, we're always in the market for new volunteers here at Jordan Lake. If you have, an interest in any sort of environmental monitoring or local and maybe have availability during those times we talked about, absolutely reach out to us here at Jordan Lake, and we will be happy to chat with you about potentially becoming one of our new bald eagle monitors.
That's a really cool one, John. I'm kind of curious on that too. This kind of segues into our next question. How many of those bald eagle monitors are local volunteers that don't live on site at like a volunteer village or something like that?
100% of them. So, nice. We're different in that we don't have the facilities to house volunteers like a John H. Carr or W. Kerr Scott does. So, much like Falls Lake, we only manage the dam and then a couple surrounding recreation areas. So we don't have the facilities to offer. So all of our volunteers are going to be local. I think the farthest that a volunteer comes from is Burlington, North Carolina. So they have to get to their observation spot, about 45 minutes to an hour. The rest are from the more immediate local area. So Cary, Apex, Pittsboro, I believe a couple from Durham. So they're all within easy driving distance to whatever observation spots they have.
Very cool. And yeah, I know, I think the rest of the lakes, except for Falls and Jordan, all have volunteer villages. I know we have a small one here at Philpott. I know the one at Kerr Scott's pretty nice. I don't know anything about John H. Carr's, though.
We don't quite have like an official designated titled volunteer village, but we have
cool.
Quite a few volunteer campsites. We also have a volunteer house that we generally have someone in, who doesn't have a camper, but wants to volunteer still, travel around the country, that kind of thing, but don't have an RV or camper of some sort. But we also have a lot of local volunteers too. So we kind of have like a lot of different things going on, I guess, at once. We have folks staying with us on site generally for a season or so, whether that's the summer season or the winter season, doing something. They're volunteering a certain number of hours. They're getting the campsite, that kind of thing. And then we also have our local volunteers, like John was just talking about, that are with us year round and volunteer, whether it's at a big event like Grace was just talking about, and Carmen or us, or just regularly. They want to be in charge of one trail and stick with that trail and make sure it's clear of debris and blaze all that kind of stuff. But I think Falls, David, do you guys have a volunteer site at Falls?
Yes, our site is actually where the trailer used to be for when the dam was being built. So that site, we put in electricity, put water, it has sewer hooked up and everything. So I usually recruit for one volunteer couple or two people partnership type thing, where we have the camper come and they volunteer for the summer and just help us out around the project. So John at Jordan Road need to get on having something, because it seems like you're the only project that doesn't have a site for someone to stay on.
I stand corrected because I didn't know y'all had one either.
Pursue that. I think unfortunately we are on septic here, so getting a new volunteer campsite with sewer hookup may involve expanding our septic system and field, which sounds quite expensive. But as soon as they put municipal sewer out of here, I think we'll be in good shape.
And just real quick, so that all of our listeners understand, we keep talking about this mystical volunteer village. What it is it's a volunteer campground. in most cases. So they're different, though, than our regular campgrounds. So our campgrounds that you would book through rec.gov, you could book one that has water and electric hookups. But our volunteer campgrounds, they usually have all hookups. So they have sewage, water, and electrical. We allow them to have like satellite TV if they, furnish their own satellite. Of course, we can't pay for that or anything. And in some cases, we even have Wi-Fi for them. So that's like our own, that's what we're calling our on-site volunteers, is volunteers who stay in those villages. And then now that we have volunteer gate attendants, each campground usually has at least 2 camp host campsites. And since we've halved that number of paid camp hosts we now use, that other campsite is now a volunteer. So that's once again a full hookup site, sewage, water, and electric that those on-site volunteers get. So that's what we mean mostly by on-site versus local. Is on-site literally lives on government property somewhere, and then local, they would commute to come volunteer.
I think something you're talking about, Dylan, is really interesting too, because, and I think it kind of gets into like why people volunteer as well. So especially for our volunteers that are on site, with us here at John H. Carr, there's a big like camaraderie aspect of that. And I don't know if y'all also experience that too, but they're also getting to meet new people, and they're living maybe at a campsite near another volunteer or even a contract gate attendant, or, and they're getting to meet new people and talk about their experiences and work together and do different things. And same for local volunteers too. At John H. Carr, we do an appreciation luncheon. All of our volunteers come, we thank them, we give them, slips of paper, all that kind of stuff. And so, thanking them and for the work that they're doing. And so I feel like there's a lot of camaraderie in this as well, both amongst volunteers, but also with rangers, and our staff and contributing. And that's a big thing for folks that are doing this with us. I don't know how y'all feel, what y'all experience, but from my experience, that kind of happens quite a bit.
Yeah, Emily, I think here at W. Kerr Scott, we experience that same thing. A lot of times we've had volunteers, travel from, the West or something, West Coast or something like that. And they come over here, and then they bring the next season, their friends come and volunteer as well. So we've had that a few times where people have brought other people that they've volunteered with, other places, and they've come here to volunteer with us. And then for our volunteer village, and it ebbs and flows. Sometimes if we have a whole bunch of new volunteers, like this year, we recruited almost every single volunteer was new, just because we had last year, we had a lot of people who retired and gave up volunteering. They retired from their volunteer position. They sold their camper. They settled down somewhere permanently because they were just aging out of doing that work. But so this year was kind of a growing year for us, having fairly new volunteers. Or maybe they were returns from last year, but they really haven't established being here for very many years. So they didn't have the camaraderie as like maybe we had 2-3 years ago, where it was the same volunteers for like 7 years in a row. So they really grew as a family in the volunteer village, and everyone, went out to dinner together all the time. And they just had that, buddy system, I guess, or camaraderie with that. So every year is a little different, especially if we get people who don't return, or maybe this is their second year, but they're not returning next year. So it does ebb and flow for us here at W. Kerr Scott. But yeah, the reason, maybe why people volunteer, they just want to, they really like coming to our park. And so that they want to be in on the ground level. And then also it's a way for those who maybe are retired, or, we had a volunteer family this year, and they're returning next year, that they homeschool their children and work remotely. So they are able to come and do our campground gate attendant position, and also still do their work and homeschool their children. So that was a really valuable experience for them, and then also for us to have them here as well.
Hey, Grace, this is John. So I actually have a funny story about one of W. Kerr Scott's volunteers. I'm not sure they're still there. They were there for a couple of years, but back when I was a ranger at Scott, we had one of our park attendants at the time pointed out that there was a camper that was hopping from park to park, and it had been found out that they had been there for like a month and a half straight at that point. So, and of course, for those that aren't aware, the Corps of Engineers has a rule against staying at a park for more than 14 days in a 30-day period, essentially just to prevent people from doing that, taking up all the spots so that other new folks can't potentially move in. So it kind of just keeps things moving and allows new people to come through. So, but anyways, so I went and talked with the camper and wrote them a warning citation, but I kind of threw it in at the end. I was like, you guys clearly enjoy staying at the park. Maybe you guys should volunteer with us. Not really in the most serious tone, but they kind of looked at each other and was like, that's actually a good idea. And it turned out that they approached the volunteer coordinator and ended up volunteering for, I think, a couple of years until their health prevented them from coming back. But you never know how you're going to recruit volunteers. So maybe for the folks that manage campgrounds and finding folks that are staying past that 14-day window, maybe that could be a potential volunteer source for y'all.
We have at John H. Kerr had that exact same situation, John, multiple times. And almost all of them have ended up volunteering with us. And then they end up loving volunteering. They like being here. They either stay volunteering, like continue their volunteer service at John H. Kerr, or it's kind of like they've fallen in love with volunteering with the Corps, and now they've gone to other states and are volunteering at other Corps Lake projects or U.S. Fish and Wildlife sites or with NPS, National Park System. So yeah, I think a lot of our volunteers have gotten into volunteering because they like a specific place and want to spend even more time there, or want to see something new, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it is a reasonable transition. If they're there a lot or all the time, then, you could stay there for free, donate some hours to us every week. And, it's kind of a win-win.
It is. And a lot of our local volunteers, I think, have the same kind of interest in volunteering. They want to give back. They like to visit, whether it's a park, or they like the natural environment, that the park's providing or that the lake project is providing, like you were talking about earlier, and they want to kind of contribute back to that as well.
Yeah, that kind of goes along with two of the type of people that I was thinking as well that we're starting to see more often. We haven't been successful in getting one type here at Philpott, and I'll hit on that in a minute. But that's number one, I call them the road warriors. And that's like the folks that retire and they're like, let's sell the house and just go live on the road and just go travel. A lot of times those people end up volunteering, and typically they're not long-term volunteers. They'll volunteer for like a season and then go somewhere else. But what they're doing is they're volunteering at a place and then like using it as a hub to go and travel and see all the things around it. And then the next season they'll go volunteer somewhere else and kind of do the same thing. So that's a really cool one. And then my other one is so we've had some road warriors come through Philpott, but the other ones we haven't had yet, but we have had inquire, is my hashtag van life people out there. So especially with COVID, I know you guys have seen it, especially in the campgrounds and stuff. I know my wife, she's big into like vlogs on YouTube and stuff, like these lifestyle vlogs and whatnot. One of them is like lifestyle vlogs that live the van life or the camper life, where either they have a work from home job or maybe one of the spouses travel a lot and makes enough from their job to allow the other one to kind of stay around the campsite, if you will. And so that person typically volunteers, but starting to see inquiries from that type of thing a lot more often. And I think it's really cool because, they have the time, they're willing to put in, a little bit more of those volunteer hours to have a spot. So it's pretty neat. It's just a variety of reasons why people volunteer. All right, moving on from that. Let's see, how can people find out more about the different volunteer positions?
I know for us at John H. Kerr, we post on volunteer.gov. We also post actively on WorkCamper, but we also will post, different volunteer opportunities, whether it's a big event like Grace and Carmen have talked about, or even like, hey, we need an intern volunteer, or we'd really like to have this done. We'll put that on our Facebook page. Those are kind of the three like main online sites. But to be honest, the best thing that folks can do is to call our project office, our visitor assistance center, and talk to us about what they have an interest in, what they'd like to do, even if it's like a year in advance. We're talking to some volunteers right now that have come up, done a little site visit. They're wanting to come this way, but they haven't, they haven't made the move yet, so it doesn't matter when or how we want to have volunteers. So call us.
Yeah, and at Debbie Kerr Scott, to piggyback on what Emily said, we use volunteer.gov for our positions that we're trying to fill kind of more on a permanent basis, at least for one rec season. And then we do a lot of word of mouth type things. So we'll have people. So our guests here that we're going to talk to in a little bit, they have been camping here for years and wanted to see how they could give back and volunteer here more on a permanent basis. So that seems to be a trend right now where people have been visiting for many rec seasons, whether they're camping or whatever, and they have family in the nearby, maybe in Raleigh or one of the nearby major cities, and they want to get closer to family. So they'll come and volunteer with us so that they can be in the area because they like it so much. And then we also go to some job fairs and things like that to get more of our like volunteer interns through either high school or college interns so that they can fulfill those volunteer hours that they need for, graduation requirements or an internship requirement. But then also we get to, at least I enjoy mentoring them and kind of showing them what it's like in the real world, not outside of the classroom, what a job in a Parks and Recreation degree or biology degree would entail.
Yeah, ditto here. Just wherever you're interested in going, just call and talk to someone. A lot of times, Corps projects will have a volunteer coordinator specifically. That's who I would call and ask for. That's kind of their bread and butters to give you all the info about things like that. Or also call other volunteers that you may know. A lot of times, I know at Philpott, for example, we use volunteers to man the front desk there at the visitor center. So if you call the front desk and someone picks up the phone that don't give you the title as, park ranger or manager or something like that, just feel free to be like, hey, are you a volunteer? And if you have volunteer questions, spend some time picking their brain a little bit because this time of year, they're probably bored at the front desk anyways. So
I think right now, Dylan, at Philpott, you have a volunteer who was with us this summer at John H. Carr, and before that was at W. Kerr Scott. And it was absolutely word of mouth that, that volunteer has moved around our district in many ways. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's great. She's been doing the visitor center for the most part for us this year. She's been awesome.
Has she told everybody that each park or each lake is her favorite lake?
Yes. Exactly.
Honestly, I haven't heard her say. Now that you mention it, John, I'm gonna have to plant that seed. We are your favorite, right? If she says no, she can go back to her favorite lake next year. How about
that? And we'll gladly take her back.
Yes. Okay, Grace. Okay. I see how it's going. I am interested, continuing on, how people who want to volunteer with you guys down at Falls and Jordan, how they would find out. Because it is a bit different. We've talked a lot about camping. It is a little bit different.
Yeah, Emily. So yeah, we definitely have volunteer opportunities. They may not be as recreation focused, I guess you can say, as some of the ones like we've heard from the other bigger projects. But now we do have plenty of trails here around our visitor center and recreation areas that, we do like to recruit for. I would say the biggest by far is what I mentioned before. The biggest opportunity for volunteering would be our bald eagle monitoring program, because that takes so much work with 25 nests. to coordinate. But, we, like I said, we do have the trail work. But honestly, if you're local in the area, and you have a skill that you think may be applicable to something we offer here, by all means, reach out to us. Our volunteer coordinator position is vacant, but we hope to hire that position in the very near future. But I'm kind of the de facto coordinator of sorts because I already do a fair bit of coordinating directly for the monitoring program. So I would, if you do have, an interest in volunteering, whether it be the trails or something else, reach out to our project, and really just ask for, any ranger. And we're all pretty versed in what opportunities, you may be able to get involved with out here at Jordan Lake.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about like the time commitment for volunteers, because I know like we have a set time that we need like on-site volunteers to volunteer, but that doesn't necessarily apply to local volunteers. Anybody want to hit on that a little bit? I know for us here, I think it's district-wide, if I remember. Someone tell me if I get these numbers wrong, but I think if it's a single person that's on site, or a single individual that is on site volunteering, living in a campsite, I think it's we ask for 24 volunteer hours a week for them to be able to stay on that campsite. And then for couples, I think it's 32 hours a week. Does that sound right to anyone?
At JHK, we just ask for 24 hours a week, regardless of who and if they want to split it up or not, mostly because of similar situations. We've had folks come where, one person's actually working remotely, so it really is kind of just one person volunteering, all that kind of stuff. So for us, we ask for 24 hours. But I will say a lot of our volunteers contribute more time than that because they care and they want to, and they are invested in the work product. So yes, that is 24 hours is what we do here at John H. Carr.
Gotcha. Yeah, that definitely makes sense as far as in situations where, if it's a family or a couple, you have one that works and one don't, that one person would be getting the volunteer hours. So that definitely makes sense there. And that time commitment, obviously you break that up as a volunteer however you want. So if there's days in a week you can't volunteer, then that's fine. But if you can kind of make your own schedule, I mean, you're volunteered, you don't necessarily have a quote unquote boss. So now it does help to do things when like the permanent staff is available that can kind of give you a little guidance. But even if you're kind of self-led and, you just go and take it upon yourself to pick up trash for a day or something, most of the time we're understanding with tracking those hours, if you will.
Yeah, Dylan, we have at W. Kerr Scott, we have a variety of different kinds of schedules. We have some that just come and go when they can or when they're available. And some, like for me, when I do enter programs, I let them know well in advance. And I actually don't say yes to a program, or if someone's asking for, me to do a program for 100 kids, I don't say yes until I've talked to my volunteers. And if they're available to help, I'll say yes to an event or a program, just because I know I don't take on a larger group than I can handle by myself. And then if they're working in the campgrounds or volunteering in the campgrounds, they might have a set schedule of working 4 days on, 4 days off, or 3 days on 9 to 6, or 4 days on from 3 to 6, but then in the gatehouse. But then the other times they're going campground or campsite to campsite cleaning and making sure people signed in, registered, and all that stuff. So we're kind of in a transition with our campgrounds currently operating in a different way than we have in the past. But then we also have those volunteers that just go and do general maintenance. So they know that a bridge needs to be repaired. So as soon as they get the supplies and the materials, they work on it at their pace. And usually they outpace us as rangers because, they get on a job and they just do it until it's done. And where we might have to like break and go, respond to something else and then come back to it, or plan a day where everybody can pitch in and help. So, but yeah, they definitely have, some of our volunteers just have, here's the list of things that need to get done. and they just go work on them whenever they can. So either way, both, all aspects of it are very beneficial to the way we operate. And we really couldn't, I think, operate our project without our volunteers.
Yeah, totally agreed.
Oh, I was just going to add that, all these hours that our volunteers put in are very, very valuable. And we do track those. Obviously, we have reporting requirements and such for our volunteer service, but most importantly, we're able to track the volunteer time and recognize those hours through a couple of different passes that we have. One of them is the Corps Annual Day Use Pass. After a volunteer accumulates 100 hours of service, we can issue one of them at no cost to the volunteer, which gets them into Corps day use areas at no cost. And then there's also the America the Beautiful Volunteer Pass, and that one can be issued after 250 service hours, and that goes across all federal agencies and also years too. So if a volunteer is only able to volunteer a little bit of time each year, we can keep track of that. And when they reach that amazing number of 250, we're able to issue that pass. So that's just a couple of the ways that we can recognize the valuable time that volunteers put in. Absolutely.
So that is our time commitment for the volunteers. And I do have a little excerpt here, our positions year round. To answer your question, we accept volunteers year round, but as far as on-site volunteers, we have a restriction as to how long volunteers can stay on project. And that's basically to keep people from living on us, for lack of better terminology. And a lot of locations have a list of people wanting to volunteer. So, they kind of got to keep that refreshed a little bit at times. But for the most part, the other thing it has to do with is most of our systems are not winter-proof. So a lot of our volunteer campgrounds and stuff, the pipes could freeze, and a lot of times they just need to be winterized and take a couple months break before we allow people to come back in them. So that's why we don't have year-round on-site volunteers. But like I said, as far as locally or people commuting, we do take volunteers, 24/7, not 24/7. I shouldn't say that. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Let's see. Before taking a volunteer position, what questions should you ask us? It depends on what matters to you. Some people want to still feel connected and have internet and Wi-Fi, that sort of thing. Some people are concerned about satellite reception, maybe what brand satellites work best, cell phone reception, what brand cell phones work best in the area, maybe distance to town, things to maybe sites to see. Like I was talking earlier about our Road Warrior volunteers, they kind of use it as a hub to go explore other areas. So a lot of times, it'd be good to ask, what else is there to do when you're not volunteering, when you're using your leisure or your recreation time. That's all the things I can think of off the top of my head. What do you guys have?
I think that you covered a lot of the questions that we get. Generally, those of us that work with volunteers more regularly here at John H. Carr, we'll have kind of a generic email that once we get folks who are interested, we'll kind of send basic info, to them about here's the closest towns, here's how many miles they are, this is where most people go, if we don't have laundry on site, that kind of thing. So, if you're interested in volunteering, just ask for that kind of information in terms of logistics of living in the area.
Absolutely. And one thing I almost forgot about was volunteer positions. So, ask about what volunteer openings there are, because you don't want to just tell a project you want to volunteer thinking you're going to go there and be a campground host, and you show up and they say, oh, well, that position's already filled, so we have XYZ, and then that not be something you're interested in. Because it's volunteering your time. We want you to be genuinely interested in it and want to be there. So that'd be another
Absolutely.
Important thing to ask.
Yeah, that's a very important one to ask. What are you really willing to do, work with people, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely.
All right. Let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
How fast can a volunteer start working once accepted? Carmen, you're the volunteer coordinator.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different requirements that we have. In some cases, we basically call it onboarding, and it's really similar to bringing on a new employee. We have for a volunteer volunteer agreement that's done, the background check, and to be honest, the background check is probably the most cumbersome part of volunteering with us. So sometimes that can take a while to complete. And then it also depends on if the facility's ready. In particular, is the campsite that you're going to stay on, is it available yet? So different things like that. And then, of course, once you do get up and running as a volunteer, once we get that agreement done, the background check's done, and you're ready to start, there may be some training that's involved that we have to do before you can really, get into the position. So it can sometimes take a little bit of time.
Carmen, I'd like to add too, we also do, if they're just a one-time volunteer, if they're here for a trash pickup or something like that, we usually just do the volunteer service agreement. And usually if it's a group, we have the group leader sign it, and then anyone under 18 has to get parental permission. So that is a less cumbersome, setup there, because they're not volunteering for more than just that one time. It's not an ongoing thing, so they don't have to go through the background check and everything. And then we also have, for those who are going to be here long term, whether it's the whole season or even year round, because we do have year round volunteers as well. If their position warrants them driving a government vehicle, they also go through our defensive driving training so that they can drive our vehicles, so that they can go pick up trash or go patrol and make sure, if they have to clean up graffiti or anything like that, or just travel to and from programs or different spots if they're going out and, using the leaf blower to blow off trails, that they're not using their own vehicle, but they're using a government vehicle.
Yes, excellent point. So as Grace mentioned, for those kind of those standalone one-time events, the background check isn't required. But when we get into volunteers doing other different types of position, usually on a longer basis, sometimes not, sometimes it could just be a short time frame, but those do typically require that background check. But usually, once it's done, if you keep volunteering, you don't have to go through that cumbersome process again. So that's one benefit of that.
Awesome. So speaking of the volunteer application process, let's hear from someone who has gone through it before. So as I mentioned earlier, the Hornick family is going to be interviewed today. So let's turn it over to Grace and hear what volunteers have to say from a volunteer perspective. And I'm sure that will answer a lot of everyone's questions as far as the volunteer process and what it looks like from the inside.
All right. So we have two special guests here joining us. These are our volunteers that are new to W. Kerr Scott this year, EJ and Lori Hornick. If you folks want to introduce yourselves real quick, and we'll get into interviewing you.
Hello, this is EJ Hornick, one of the volunteers from this summer at Kerr Scott Lake.
And I'm Lori, and it's nice to be talking to you.
Well, thank you both for joining us today and being on our podcast. We rarely get to get the perspective of some of our volunteers and see why you do this and why it's important to continue volunteering. So we just appreciate your insight today. So we're going to start off by asking what kind of jobs do you do here at W. Kerr Scott?
Well, we started in April this year, right around April 1st, in fact, and we stayed all the way through September. And the jobs were quite varied. The volunteer coordinator here had a number of things. A lot of it consisted of just trash pickup, picnic shelter cleaning, such as blowing the debris off of the floors, usually leaves and twigs and such, and maybe rinsing the picnic tables at those shelters. We also did the kiosk brochure replacement to keep those filled so that the people that visited would have information available at all times. We did some painting of kiosks and other bulletin boards. We did some painting on crosswalks where the trail crosses the roads. We did playground safety checks. We did life vest inspections, repairs to wooden signposts and benches. We also gave a lot of advice to visitors that when they would see us out there, they would not only thank us for doing the work, but they would also have questions regarding the Kerr Scott project. And fortunately, by coming up here for a number of summers camping ourselves, we learned a lot of the things about Kerr Scott Lake. So we're able to answer most of their questions. And we would give information such as water safety, nature, recreational activities, that sort of thing. We also helped Ranger Grace with environmental education classes and some of her other projects that she has ongoing.
That's right. And EJ and Lori, both you helped do some research for native ground cover for our backyard habitat and helped with some pollinator site prep, pollinator habitat site prep for me, for my ongoing project. So we definitely appreciate all the work that you've done and continue to do. So next question, why do you volunteer?
Well, I volunteer in order, I guess, primarily to spend more time at places I enjoy. And as I just said, we have been coming up to Kerr Scott in the summers. We had lived in Florida for the last 12 years. So we'd come up during the summer basically to escape the summer heat in Florida and come up to a beautiful place as this is and stay at the campgrounds. Well, as you know, the Kerr Lakes are very busy, so it was difficult to stay more than just the weekdays unless you had a reservation well in advance. So we thought, well, how could we spend more time here? Well, why don't we volunteer? So that's how that came about. And that wasn't actually the start of our volunteering, but that's how we did that at special places. So that's really why we volunteer. Also, we do notice that we enjoy talking to the other people here, the other campers and visitors. So we thought in a volunteer position, we could be even more helpful in that way, because it's great to see people enjoy a place like this. And it kind of gives you a lot of enthusiasm to do those things.
Awesome.
I might also add, Ranger Grace, that I also realized the Rangers could use our help.
Definitely.
And, meeting Grace and seeing the projects were very exciting. And we do a lot of gardening at our home, and we've done gardening for other projects. So this really suited us very well. And it's just one more reason why we wanted to be here.
Awesome. Okay, how did you find out about this opportunity here or maybe some of your other volunteer opportunities?
Mostly, we just walked up to a ranger and chatted with them and told them that we'd like to volunteer, what we have to offer. It was that easy. Then he would put us in touch. He would give us a phone number, put us in touch with whoever we need to call. It's that easy.
Yeah, and when we did travel, we'd also see other volunteers that were working at these sites, and we seemed to get along well with them and thought it would be a good fit for us.
And you did mention that you volunteered at other places. So would you like to list a few of those for us and kind of what experience that was like?
Sure. And again, I'll say that we ended up volunteering there because we wanted to spend more time at those special places. So Lori and I retired in 2006, so we were able to free up more time to go camping and travel a bit more. So we started to volunteer at several different parks. We were also local volunteers in Maryland, where we grew up, and it was mostly trail work that we did. But when we moved to Florida, we would travel the summers, and we ended up, one of the sites we ended up was a core site, the Raystown Lake outside of Huntington, Pennsylvania, as volunteers. And we also volunteered at a state park in Maryland as campground hosts at Susquehanna State Park. And down in our home in Florida, we used to go there during the winters, since the season's kind of, it's almost always summer in Florida, let's face it. So we would spend the winters in Florida as a way to escape some of the cold Maryland winters. And we were at a park named Caloosahatchee Regional Park, which is a county park in South Florida in Lee County. And so those are the main ones. I might add that Raystown had a nice project for us in gardening, and it involved making a rain garden to catch the runoff from the visitor center roof. And that kind of got us excited about doing more volunteering.
Yeah, and actually in your resume, because I did help recruit you two specifically. I didn't recruit all the volunteers that we have, but since you did have some interest in the gardening aspect and then also interpretation, I helped Johnny, our volunteer coordinator, recruit for your position. And I was really excited that you've already created a rain garden. And I figured you could help with our pollinator habitat in our backyard behind our environmental education center. And you have, and the work still continues. And so we're really excited about
We're looking forward
having you guys still here. Okay, so let's go with, has anything surprised you about volunteering that maybe you didn't foresee?
Well, I would say the overwhelming appreciation that we were given by the park visitors, other volunteers, and especially the permanent staff, the rangers and the administrative staff at the parks themselves. Kerr Scott, for instance, we bumped into their volunteer coordinator by accident last year and struck up a conversation regarding the bike trails. And before we knew it, we were asking for the application for the next season. So that's another thing that just makes you feel good when they kind of approach you based on a conversation that you have with them. Yeah, I think that explains a lot of the surprising things that we felt.
And what has been your favorite part about volunteering?
I pretty much thought every day was a good day. We typically get up in the morning, have our routine, starting with trash pickup. But occasionally the rangers would have another project that's more urgent, and it was nice to mix the day up. We would paint road lines, crosswalks, replace damaged benches, stuff like that. So it just broke our day up.
Yeah, and as I said before, I really enjoy seeing the visitors enjoying their time at the park. And I guess they realize, as I do, just how important having these special outdoor places adds to the quality of their lives. And that's probably what I really do get out of it.
Mm-hmm. And this is your famous last words, if you could share any challenges maybe you've encountered along the way in your many years of volunteering that you'd like to pass on to anyone who's maybe out there thinking that they would like to volunteer, but they just don't, maybe they might not foresee any challenges or anything like that. Have you come across anything that you'd like to pass on to anyone else?
I guess with some facilities, the core facilities being maybe one of them, it seems like the application process is a little bit tedious. I don't know if it can be made simpler, but it seemed it was more of a endurance type application rather than one to just seek information.
Oh, I see.
Some people may have trouble with that because
we did.
It involved a lot of time on our personal computers doing an online application, which in itself isn't bad, but it seemed like it was very specified. For instance, they didn't seem to like abbreviations.
Oh, okay.
And
didn't realize that. Yeah.
So, I mean, if you can get through that, the rest of it's pretty easy because, then you get down to actually, being invited and pulling up to the campsite and everything else.
And then away you go, right?
So.
Gotcha. So the application part was a little tricky. And it probably just because we are a federal agency possibly and how we have to have those.
Yeah. Oh, and I realize background checks are a part of it. It just seemed like maybe it was, it could be simplified, but that's not for me to say. I worked in state government in Maryland, so I know there's a good bit of bureaucratic requirements in these things. But if we could simplify things for people, it did seem to make things work smoother.
Yeah. Right. Well, do either of you have anything else to add before we end this interview?
Well, I just want to say how enjoyable it's been this whole summer. And as a result of coming to Kerr Scott Lake all these years, we finally decided to make the move here. So we now are local volunteers, and we happily await more projects to be given to us, and we can maybe pick a day here and there to come in and work on some of these things. So, we're we're now, I think, even more dependable if something needs to be done. So we're looking forward to that kind of new role.
Oh, yes. And as we've covered the local volunteers versus those who maybe live away and just travel just here for the summer, that is something we need. All kinds of volunteers from all walks of life, but those local volunteers that are just a phone call away are very appreciated and much needed too. So we appreciate all your hard work, and we thank you for joining us today on this interview.
Well, thank you. We're a pleasure being here.
Be sure to catch our weekly Ranger Minutes, where each lake will give some personal insights into their own volunteer programs. And then in December, our interpretive rangers are going to give you a sneak peek into some of their favorite programs. So this is going to be a unique one. So be sure to tune in next month. And the environmental fact that I'm going to share today is that next Friday, November 17th, is National Take a Hike Day. So I want everyone listening to be sure and emphatically tell anyone you run into that day to take a hike. Literally, go find a trail, a greenway, even a sidewalk, and go enjoy the crisp fall air that we've been promised, I think, is eventually coming. We're entering our third month of September, so maybe we'll eventually be done with the 80-degree weather, but we'll see. But anyways, back to the trails. If you're an inexperienced hiker and you aren't really sure where to start, I can share a few resources to consider. The first resource, and it's probably my personal favorite, is All Trails. They have a website. They also have a mobile app, and that is ALLTRAILS. I found it to probably be the most comprehensive trail clearinghouse available to the public. There's quite a few of them, but that All Trails probably is the most comprehensive, in my opinion. Most of the listed trails have reviews and photos, and they're recent. Sometimes you'll see a review from 8 years ago, but almost all of them have a review, it seems like, within the past, 3, 4, 5 weeks or so. And a lot of them are very helpful, especially when you're considering a new trail or trail that you've never been on. It is free to use, but the caveat is that it does require you to create an account. For most, that's not a big deal. But if you want to look at, a resource where you might not have to create an account, you can just use a simple search engine query. So, say if you Google hiking trails and, insert your location or hiking trails near me and search, it'll provide you with, multiple pages of results. A lot of times, if you're using Google, it'll also pop up a window with a map with a lot of trailhead icons visible to select. So, if you're using the map, decide to use the map, you just select the icon. It'll oftentimes open another window with, reviews and photos. And a lot of times there will be a link to a website where you can find the additional trail map. So hopefully this all will start you on the right path, so to speak, and discovering some of the trail resources in your area.
Awesome, John. Thank you. And everybody should probably enjoy that while we're in fall summer number 3 before we enter fall number 2 and then go straight to sub-zero. So,
no doubt.
All right. So next up is our safety tip of the month. And one thing that's really going on a lot right now in southwestern North Carolina and western Virginia is a lot of wildfires. So it's a very dry time of year. For the southeast, the fall is our burn season because of the dryness of the weather and the fall leaves and all that sort of stuff. So during this time every year, we're basically, like a little tinderbox down here. So we're a lot different from out west where it's really dry during the summer. Here, our low humidity, really dry time is during the fall. And we're also on the verge of a drought scenario right now. Very little precipitation, and it's been pretty windy for the last few weeks. So things are dry are catching easily, or things are catching fire easily, and things are spreading easily. So don't build a fire unless you have to right now. I know it's the perfect time of year to build fires. If you absolutely feel the need, please put it in a fully enclosed like fire ring or fire pit, and have no space around, like build your fire on a concrete driveway or gravel driveway or something like that. Or if you have a home that has like an outdoor entertaining space that's like rock or concrete or something like that, keep it small, keep it tight and enclosed, and keep it away from any other combustible materials like leaf litter and stuff like that. So if you're using that outdoor fire pit or outdoor entertainment space you might have at your home, take the time to take a leaf blower and blow it off first or something like that, just to keep that safety factor as high as possible. But as I said earlier, right now it's just a really good time to refrain from open flame, period. I know in a lot of the Western Virginia and Southwestern North Carolina, they're actually in a burn ban right now. So if you're in those regions, and by the time this podcast comes out in a couple weeks, it could be the whole state's in burn ban. So just follow your local forest service, whether it's state Forest Service or federal Forest Service recommendations as far as the fire danger levels go. So keep an eye on that. You can go to your state Forest Service website, or you can go to the U.S. Forest Service website by region and check that out. So that is it for November's podcast. I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope you learned a lot about volunteering and what it looks like from both sides, from both points of view. I hope you realize, if you're a volunteer listening out there, I hope you realize how much you're appreciated. And if you're a potential volunteer, I hope you realize how rewarding it can be. So with that being said, until next time, stay safe out there. And if you get an opportunity, go volunteer. Thank you, everyone. Have a good month.